I'm replacing all the veterans with fresh talent. My name is Grant, 51 years old. I spent 23 years at Oakspire Electric in Louisville, Kentucky, working my way from junior accountant to chief financial officer. The woman who said that to me was Vanessa, our new director. She was 32, fresh from some consulting firm in New York, and she had been in the building for exactly 11 days. I nodded, handed her my badge, left quietly. The conference room had been packed with people I had trained, people I had mentored through audits, budget crises, payroll disasters. Nobody said a word. They just stared at their coffee cups while Vanessa smiled and talked about disrupting the old guard and bringing innovation to a stagnant culture. I had seen it coming. Small things at first. She started CCing herself on every email I sent, questioning my decisions in meetings, then rephrasing them as her own ideas 5 minutes later. She scheduled one-on-ones with my direct reports without telling me. When I asked about it, she said she was building rapport with the team. The final straw came 3 days before she fired me. I was reviewing our quarterly financials when I noticed she had tried to access the primary operating account. The system flagged it. She did not have the authorization. When I asked her about it, she said she was exploring our financial infrastructure. I did not push it, just made a note in my personal file. I had built Oakspire Electric's financial systems from scratch. When I started, we were a mid-sized contractor with 12 employees and 1 office. Now we had 4 locations, 87 employees, and contracts with 3 major utility companies. Every account, every vendor relationship, every line of credit had my fingerprints on it. But Vanessa did not care about any of that. She wanted her own people, younger, cheaper, easier to control. On my last day, I cleaned out my desk, packed up the photos of my daughter, the coffee mug she made me in high school, the plaque from the Chamber of Commerce. Nobody came by to say goodbye. A few people sent texts later that night. Generic stuff. Sorry to see you go, and good luck with whatever's next. I drove home in silence. My wife, Catherine, was waiting in the kitchen. She looked at me, and I just shook my head. They let me go. She hugged me, did not ask questions, just held on. That night I sat in my office at home and stared at my laptop. Part of me wanted to call someone, a lawyer maybe. But I was tired of fighting, tired of proving myself to people who did not care. Then my phone buzzed. A notification from the bank. Someone had tried to access the company's main operating account again. I built Oakspire Electric's financial backbone during a crisis. It was 12 years ago. The company was hemorrhaging cash. Our previous CFO had been sloppy with the books, and we nearly lost our contractor's license. The owner at the time, a man named Douglas, brought me in to fix it. He was 73, tired, and ready to retire. He told me he trusted me to keep the company alive. So I did. I restructured every account, renegotiated contracts with our suppliers, built relationships with our lenders. When Douglas retired 5 years ago, he sold the company to a private equity group. They kept me on because I was the only one who understood how everything worked. The new owners did not care about the day-to-day. They just wanted their quarterly reports and their profit margins. I gave them both. Oakspire Electric grew. We expanded into Tennessee and Indiana. I hired good people, trained them, built a team that could handle anything. But private equity does not care about loyalty. They care about optics. And when Vanessa came in with her MBA and her buzzwords, they saw an opportunity to cut costs. I should have seen it sooner. The signs were all there. 2 months before she fired me, Vanessa started asking questions about our banking structure. She wanted to know why we had multiple accounts, why certain transactions required dual authorization, why I was the primary signatory on most of our contracts. I explained it to her. It was not complicated. The structure protected the company. If one account was compromised, the others were safe. If a vendor tried to pull something shady, we had safeguards. It was basic risk management. She nodded like she understood, but I could see it in her eyes. She thought I was being paranoid, old-fashioned, stuck in the past. Then she started going around me. She scheduled a meeting with our primary lender without telling me. When I found out, I called the bank. They told me she had asked about transferring signatory authority. They refused because the account agreements required my approval. I confronted her about it. She said she was exploring options for operational efficiency. I let it go. Stupid mistake, Catherine warned me. She said Vanessa was setting me up, that she was building a case to push me out. I told her she was overreacting. 2 weeks later, Vanessa fired me. The worst part was not losing the job. It was watching people I had mentored sit there and say nothing. People I had fought for. People I had covered for when they screwed up. They just looked down at their notebooks and let it happen. I drove home that day and sat in my driveway for 20 minutes before going inside. I kept thinking about Douglas, about how he had trusted me to protect what he built. And I realized I had failed. 2 days after she fired me, my phone rang at 7 a.m. It was Vanessa. "Grant, I need you to come in. Right now." Her voice was different, high-pitched, panicked. "I don't work there anymore," I said. "I know, but something's wrong with the accounts. The bank froze everything. I can't access anything. Payroll is supposed to go out today, and I can't." I hung up. Catherine looked at me from across the kitchen table. "What was that?" "Vanessa," I said. "The accounts are frozen." She set down her coffee. "Why?" "Because I'm the only authorized signatory." When I built Oakspire Electric's financial systems, I made sure I had control. Not because I was paranoid, not because I wanted power, but because I had seen what happened when too many people had access to the money. Embezzlement, fraud, vendors getting paid twice, contractors taking kickbacks. So I structured it carefully. Every major account required my signature. Every wire transfer over $10,000 needed my approval. Every line of credit had me listed as the primary contact. The private equity group did not care. They trusted me. They knew I had kept the company profitable for years, so they signed off on it. Vanessa never bothered to check. When she fired me, she assumed someone else would take over, that the accounts would just transfer seamlessly, that the bank would cooperate. But banks do not work that way. They do not hand over control just because someone new walks into an office with a fancy title. My phone rang again. "Vanessa." I let it go to voicemail. Then a text message. "Please. Employees aren't getting paid. I need your help." I stared at the message for a long time. Catherine came up behind me, put her hand on my shoulder. "What are you going to do?" "Nothing," I said. "Grant, she fired me, in front of everyone. Didn't even give me a chance to finish my projects, didn't thank me for 23 years, just handed me a box and told me to leave." Catherine did not say anything. She knew I was right. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Vanessa. "The board is asking questions. I don't know what to tell them." I turned off my phone. I had spent 23 years building Oakspire Electric. I had protected it through recessions, audits, bad hires, bad decisions. I had given everything to that company, and they replaced me like I was nothing. Vanessa wanted to disrupt the old guard, bring in fresh talent, innovate. Well, now she could innovate her way out of this mess. I poured another cup of coffee and sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, started going through my files. If she wanted to run the company, she was going to have to earn it. The voicemails started piling up. Vanessa called 6 times that first day. Then the board members started calling, then the private equity group. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. Why were the accounts frozen? I ignored them all. Catherine asked me if I was sure about this. I told her I was done being the guy who fixed everyone else's mistakes. On the 3rd day, someone knocked on my door. It was Stephen, one of the senior accountants I had hired 8 years ago. He looked exhausted. "Grant, can we talk?" I let him in. He sat down at the kitchen table and rubbed his face. "Payroll didn't go out. People are panicking. Vanessa's been locked in her office all day. The board is threatening to pull funding if this isn't fixed by the end of the week." "Not my problem," I said. "Grant, come on. You know half these people have kids, mortgages, they need their paychecks." Then Vanessa should have thought about that before she fired me. Stephen looked at me. "She's offering to bring you back. As a consultant, double your old salary." I almost laughed. No. Grant, she humiliated me, Stephen, in front of everyone. You were there. You didn't say a word. He looked down. I know. I'm sorry. But if you don't help, the company's going under. And it's not just Vanessa who'll lose her job, it's all of us. I felt something twist in my chest. He was right. If Oakspire Electric collapsed, 87 people would be out of work. People I had hired, people I cared about. But I also knew that if I came back now, nothing would change. Vanessa would keep her job. The board would keep trusting her. And I would be right back where I started, doing all the work while someone else took the credit. Tell Vanessa to figure it out herself, I said. Stephen left. He did not say goodbye. That night, Catherine asked me if I was doing the right thing. I don't know, I said. You're hurting people you care about. I know. So what's the point? I did not have an answer. The next morning, I got a call from a lawyer. He worked for the private equity group that owned Oakspire Electric. He said they were prepared to take legal action if I did not release control of the accounts. On what grounds, I asked. Obstruction, sabotage, we'll figure it out. Good luck with that, I said and hung up. But it rattled me. I had not considered that they might try to sue me. I called my own lawyer, a woman named Jocelyn who had handled my contract negotiations years ago. She listened to everything and then laughed. They have no case, Grant. You're the authorized signatory. The bank can't legally transfer control without your consent, and since you no longer work for the company, you're under no obligation to help them. So I'm in the clear? Completely. But they're going to keep pressuring you. Are you ready for that? I thought about it. About Vanessa. About the board. About all the people who had sat in that conference room and said nothing while she fired me. Yeah, I said. I'm ready. 2 days later, Vanessa showed up at my house. She looked terrible. Hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. No makeup. Dark circles under her eyes. Grant, please, I'm begging you, just sign the transfer papers. I'll do whatever you want. I want my job back, I said. I can't do that. The board won't allow it. Then we don't have anything to talk about. She started crying. Actual tears. You're destroying this company. You're destroying me. I looked at her for a long time. You destroyed yourself, I said, and closed the door. The calls stopped after that. For 3 days, nobody contacted me. No voicemails, no texts, no lawyers knocking on my door. Catherine said it was strange. I agreed. Then I got an email from Douglas, the original owner, the man who had hired me all those years ago. Grant, I heard what happened. I'm sorry. Vanessa is in over her head. The board is panicking. They're talking about liquidating the company if this doesn't get resolved soon. I know you have every right to be angry, but these people don't deserve to lose their jobs because of one bad decision. Call me. I stared at the email for a long time. Douglas had been good to me. He had trusted me when nobody else would. He had given me a chance to rebuild my career after my previous company went under. I owed him. But I also owed it to myself to stop letting people take advantage of me. I called him anyway. Grant, he said. Thank you for calling. What do you want, Douglas? I want you to fix this, not for Vanessa, not for the board, for the people who work there. You know them. You hired most of them. They're good people. I know. Then help them. I did not say anything. Grant, I know you're angry. I would be too. But you're better than this. You're better than letting 87 people lose their jobs because one person treated you poorly. He was right. I knew he was right. But I was tired of being the guy who always did the right thing. I'll think about it, I said, and hung up. That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about Stephen, about the other people I had worked with, about the junior accountants I had trained, the payroll clerks, the office managers. They did not deserve this, but neither did I. Catherine found me in my office at 2 a.m., staring at my laptop. You're going to help them, aren't you? She said. I don't know. She sat down next to me. You're a good man, Grant. But you don't owe them anything. I know. So why are you torturing yourself? I did not have an answer. The next morning I made a decision. I called the bank, asked to speak with the branch manager, a woman named Claire who I had worked with for 15 years. She knew me, trusted me. Claire, I need a favor. Anything, Grant. I want to release partial control of the accounts, enough to cover payroll and essential operations. But I want to retain final approval on any major transactions. Can you set that up? Absolutely. I'll have the paperwork ready by this afternoon. I drove to the bank, signed the documents, called Stephen. Tell Vanessa she can access the accounts now, but only for payroll and vendor payments. Anything over $25,000 still needs my approval. Grant, thank you. Seriously, you just saved 87 jobs. I didn't do it for Vanessa, I said. I did it for you. I hung up and sat in my car for a while. Part of me felt good, like I had done the right thing, but another part of me felt hollow, like I had just let Vanessa win. Catherine was waiting for me when I got home. How do you feel? She asked. Like I just made a huge mistake, I said. She hugged me. You did what you thought was right. That's all that matters. I wanted to believe her, but I did not. 3 weeks later, I got a call from Claire at the bank. Grant, you need to see this. I drove to the bank. She handed me a stack of transaction records. Vanessa tried to authorize a wire transfer for $75,000 to a consulting firm I've never heard of. I flagged it because it needed your approval. I looked at the paperwork. The consulting firm was based in New York, same city where Vanessa used to work. Can you find out who owns this company? I asked. Claire made a few calls. 10 minutes later, she handed me a printout. The consulting firm was owned by Vanessa's husband. I stared at the paper, felt something cold settle in my chest. She had not just fired me to bring in fresh talent. She had fired me so she could funnel company money to her own business. Grant? Claire said. What do you want me to do? Deny the transfer, and send me copies of every transaction she's attempted since I left. Claire printed everything. I took it home and spent the next 2 days going through it. It was worse than I thought. Vanessa had tried to authorize 6 different wire transfers, all to companies I did not recognize, all owned by people connected to her, consulting fees, software licenses, marketing contracts. None of it legitimate. She was not incompetent. She was a thief. I called Jocelyn, my lawyer. I need you to file a report with the board, and I need you to do it quietly. I don't want Vanessa to know until it's too late. Jocelyn agreed. She compiled everything into a detailed report, sent it directly to the private equity group that owned Oakspire Electric. 2 days later, I got a call from one of the board members, a man named Lawrence who I had worked with for years. Grant, we had no idea. We thought you were just being difficult. We didn't know she was stealing from us. Now you do, I said. We're terminating her immediately, and we'd like to offer you your job back. Full salary, full benefits, whatever you want. I thought about it, about walking back into that office, about sitting in meetings with people who had watched me get fired and said nothing. No, I said. Grant, I don't want my job back, but I want something else. Name it. I want a consulting contract, 1 year, triple my old salary, and I want full control over hiring and firing in the finance department. There was a long pause. Done, Lawrence said. The next day, I drove to Oakspire Electric, walked into the building like I had never left. Vanessa was in her office, packing her things. Security was standing by the door. When she saw me, her face went white. You, she said. Me, I said. You did this. You sabotaged me. No, I said. You sabotaged yourself. I just made sure everyone found out. She tried to say something else, but security escorted her out. I watched her walk through the lobby, past all the people she had promised to lead. Nobody said goodbye. Stephen met me in the hallway. He looked relieved. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me yet, I said. We've got a lot of work to do. I spent the next 3 months rebuilding what Vanessa had broken. Hiring new people, fixing the accounts, restoring trust with our vendors and lenders. It was exhausting, but it felt right. 6 months after Vanessa was fired, I got a call from Douglas. "Grant, I heard you're doing well. The company's back on track." "We're getting there," I said. "Good, you deserve it. I always knew you'd figure it out." "Thanks, Douglas." There was a pause. I also heard Vanessa's husband's consulting firm went under. Turns out she'd been funneling money to him for months. Several of her previous employers filed lawsuits. She's facing fraud charges. I did not say anything. "You did the right thing, Grant. You protected the company, and you protected yourself." "I just did what needed to be done," I said. After I hung up, I sat in my office and thought about everything that had happened. About the day Vanessa fired me. About the panic in her voice when she called me begging for help. About the moment she realized I had caught her. Part of me felt vindicated. She had tried to destroy me, and instead she destroyed herself. But another part of me just felt tired. Catherine came into my office later that evening. She sat down across from me. "You've been quiet," she said. "Just thinking." "About Vanessa?" "About everything." She reached across the desk and took my hand. "You did the right thing, Grant. You protected people who couldn't protect themselves, and you made sure someone who was stealing got caught. That's not revenge. That's justice." I nodded. She was right, but it still felt heavy. That night I drove past the office on my way home. The lights were on. People were working late, finishing up a big project. I could see Stephen through the window, talking with one of the junior accountants. They looked focused, confident, like they knew the company was in good hands. I kept driving. A year later, I finished my consulting contract. The private equity group offered to extend it. I declined. I had done what I set out to do. The company was stable. The finances were clean. The team was strong. It was time to move on. Catherine and I bought a small cabin in Tennessee. Nothing fancy, just a place to relax, to breathe. I spent my days fishing, reading, fixing things around the property. For the first time in 23 years, I was not thinking about budgets or payroll or wire transfers. I was just living. One afternoon, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Stephen. He had been promoted to CFO after I left. He wrote to thank me, said he would not be where he was without everything I had taught him. I read the letter twice, then folded it up and put it in my desk drawer. Catherine found me sitting on the porch later that evening, watching the sun go down. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "I'm okay." She sat down next to me. We did not say anything, just watched the sky turn orange and pink and purple. I thought about Vanessa, about the board, about all the people who had underestimated me. They thought I was just some old guy who did not matter anymore, someone they could push aside and forget about. But they were wrong. I mattered. My work mattered. My experience mattered. And in the end, that was the only revenge I needed. Vanessa ended up facing federal fraud charges. The lawsuits from her previous employers piled up. Her husband's consulting firm went bankrupt. She lost everything she had stolen and more. The board members who had enabled her quietly resigned. The private equity group brought in new leadership and implemented stricter oversight policies. Stephen ran the finance department with integrity and precision, everything I had taught him. The employees I had fought to protect kept their jobs, and the company grew stronger than ever. Sometimes the best revenge is just being the person they couldn't replace. You were always his favorite. My name is Owen. I am 32 years old, and I worked alongside my father at his construction supply company in Boise, Idaho for 8 years before he passed. That line came from my older brother Grant, 3 days after the funeral. He said it while standing in Dad's office, hands in his pockets, looking at the framed photos on the wall like they offended him. I did not respond. There was nothing to say. Dad had been gone less than a week, and Grant was already circling like a vulture. Growing up, Grant had been the golden child, captain of the football team, full scholarship to college, married young to a woman Dad approved of immediately. Her name was Linda. She was polished, charming, knew exactly what to say at family dinners. Dad loved her. Meanwhile, I had been the quiet one. The one who stayed local, learned the business from the ground up, showed up every morning at 6 whether Dad asked me to or not. Grant moved to Seattle after college, started working in finance, visited twice a year maybe. But when he walked through the door, Dad lit up. It was always that way. Still, I never held it against him. He was my brother. When Dad got sick, Grant did not come home. Not until the last 2 weeks, when it was clear there was no time left. He stayed at a hotel downtown, said the house had too many memories. I slept in the guest room so I could be there if Dad needed anything in the middle of the night. The will reading was scheduled for a Thursday morning. I had not looked at the document yet. Dad's lawyer, a man named Eugene, had been handling the estate. He called me the day before and asked if I had a copy of the will. I told him I did not. "Your brother requested one," Eugene said. "Just wanted to make sure you had access too." That struck me as odd, but I let it go. The next morning I walked into Eugene's office and found Grant already seated. He wore a suit. I was in jeans and a work shirt. Linda sat beside him, her hand resting on his knee. She smiled at me. It did not reach her eyes. Eugene opened the folder and began reading. The house, the business, the assets. Most of it was left to me. A smaller portion to Grant. Grant stood up before Eugene finished. "This is wrong," he said. I looked at him. "What?" "This will is invalid," he said. "I am contesting it." Grant had always been the one with the plan. Even as kids, he knew how to work a room, how to convince people he was right. I was the one who fixed things, who stayed quiet and got the work done. After Mom died when I was 12, it was just the three of us. Dad threw himself into the business. Grant threw himself into sports, into anything that kept him out of the house. I stayed close, helped Dad with inventory, learned how to talk to suppliers, drove the delivery truck on weekends when I was old enough. Dad never said much, but I knew he appreciated it. He would clap me on the shoulder at the end of a long day, hand me a cold drink, and we would sit in the warehouse office in silence. That was enough. Grant came home less and less after college. When he did visit, it was always with Linda. She had a way of filling the room, of making everything feel lighter. Dad adored her. He would ask about her job, her family, her opinions on everything from the news to the weather. She always had the right answer. I liked her too at first. She seemed good for Grant, kept him grounded. But over the years, something shifted. She started showing up at the house when Grant was not around, said she was in town for work, wanted to check in on Dad. I did not think much of it. After Dad got his diagnosis, she came by more often, brought him meals, sat with him when I had to run errands. I was grateful. It felt like she cared. But there were small things, moments that did not sit right. Like the time I walked into the living room and found her and Dad sitting close on the couch, her hand on his arm, both of them going quiet when I entered. Or the way she would linger in the hallway when she thought I was not looking, her eyes following Dad with something I could not name. I pushed those thoughts aside. My father was dying. I had bigger things to worry about. Grant did not come home until the last 2 weeks. By then, Dad was barely conscious. Grant sat by the bed for an hour each day, then went back to his hotel. Linda stayed longer. She held Dad's hand, whispered things I could not hear. When Dad passed, I felt the weight of it settle into my bones. Grant cried at the funeral. Linda stood beside him, her face composed, her hand on his back. 3 days later, Grant told me he was contesting the will. The lawsuit hit me like a gut punch. Grant hired a lawyer from Seattle. a sharp woman who spoke in clipped sentences and treated me like I had done something wrong. Her name was Caroline, and she made it clear from the start that this was going to be a fight. "Your father was not of sound mind when he drafted this will," she said during our first meeting with Eugene. "He was heavily medicated, vulnerable. My client believes undue influence was exerted." I stared at her. "Undue influence? I took care of him." "Exactly," she said. Grant sat beside her, arms crossed, avoiding my eyes. Linda was not there. I wondered if she knew what he was doing. Eugene tried to push back, but Caroline had documents, medical records, testimony from a doctor who had seen Dad twice in his final months. She painted a picture of a sick old man, confused and dependent, manipulated by the son who stayed close. I wanted to yell, to tell them they had it backward. But I just sat there feeling the walls close in. That night I went to Dad's house. My house, technically, though it did not feel like it yet. I walked through the rooms, looking at the furniture, the tools in the garage, the half-finished projects Dad never got to complete. I found an old photo album in the closet, pictures of Mom, of me and Grant as kids, of family trips I had almost forgotten. Near the back, there were newer photos. Pictures of Linda at holiday dinners, Linda and Dad laughing on the porch, Linda holding a glass of wine in the kitchen. Something about those photos felt wrong. Not the images themselves, but the way they had been placed. Deliberately, like someone wanted them to be found. I closed the album and sat on the floor. The next morning I called Eugene. "I need a different lawyer," I said. "Someone who fights dirty." He gave me a name, a woman named Jocelyn, who had a reputation for winning impossible cases. I met her that afternoon in a coffee shop downtown. She was younger than I expected, mid-40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. I told her everything. The will, the lawsuit, the medical records Caroline was using. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "Your brother is making a mistake," she said. "He thinks he has leverage. But he does not know what I know." "What do you know?" She smiled. "Let me do some digging first, but trust me, Owen, this case is not over." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think there was a way out of this. But sitting there, watching her take notes, I could not shake the feeling that the worst was still coming. The preliminary hearing was set for a Tuesday morning in late April. I walked into the courthouse with Jocelyn beside me, her briefcase in hand, her expression calm. Grant and Caroline were already seated at their table. Linda sat in the gallery behind them, her hands folded neatly in her lap. I had not spoken to my brother in 3 weeks, not since he filed the lawsuit. Every interaction went through lawyers now, every conversation filtered through legal language that made my head hurt. The judge was an older man with gray hair and a tired expression. He listened as Caroline presented her case. She was good. She made it sound like I had taken advantage of a dying man, twisted his mind, convinced him to cut Grant out of his inheritance. "Owen stayed close because he knew he could control the outcome," Caroline said. "He isolated his father from the rest of the family. He made himself indispensable, and when the time came, he ensured the will reflected his efforts." I wanted to stand up and shout, to tell the judge that I stayed because I loved my father, not because I wanted his money. But Jocelyn put a hand on my arm and shook her head slightly. When it was her turn, Jocelyn kept it brief. "Your Honor, the allegations made by the plaintiff are baseless. Owen cared for his father out of love and duty, not manipulation. We will demonstrate that the will was drafted with full knowledge and clear intent. Furthermore, we have evidence that will shed light on the true nature of this dispute." The judge nodded. "We will proceed to trial. Discovery begins immediately." That was it. No resolution, just the promise of more fighting, more waiting. Outside the courthouse, Grant walked past me without a word. Linda followed him, her heels clicking on the pavement. She glanced back once, her expression unreadable. Jocelyn and I went to a diner across the street. She ordered coffee. I ordered nothing. "This is going to get worse before it gets better," she said. "Your brother is angry. He feels entitled, but that is going to work in our favor. How? She hesitated. There are things about this case that do not add up. I have been looking into Linda's visits to your father. The timing, the frequency. It is unusual. What do you mean? She came to see him a lot. More than you realized. And according to phone records I subpoenaed, she called him almost every day for the last year of his life. I frowned. Why would she do that? Jocelyn did not answer directly. I also found something interesting in your father's financial records. He made several large cash withdrawals in the months before he died. 10,000 here, 15,000 there, always in cash. What was he using it for? I do not know yet, but I'm going to find out. I sat there, trying to make sense of it. Linda and Dad, phone calls, cash withdrawals, none of it fit together. There is one more thing, Jocelyn said. I spoke to a woman who worked at the hospice center where your father spent his final weeks. She remembers Linda, said she was there almost every night, always alone. Grant was at the hotel. Exactly. I looked at her. What are you saying? She leaned forward. I am saying your brother does not know his wife as well as he thinks he does. The discovery process dragged on for weeks. Jocelyn subpoenaed medical records, financial statements, phone logs. Caroline pushed back on everything, filing motions to block access to certain documents, arguing that Jocelyn was on a fishing expedition. But Jocelyn kept digging. One evening in early May, she called me. I need you to come to my office, she said. Now. I drove downtown and found her at her desk, surrounded by papers. She looked up when I walked in, her expression serious. I found something, she said. She handed me a stack of printed emails. They were between Linda and my father, dozens of them, spanning more than a year. I read through them slowly, my stomach tightening with each line. They were not professional. They were not friendly, they were intimate. I have been thinking about you all day. I miss the way you make me laugh. I cannot wait to see you again. I set the emails down. This is not possible. It is, Jocelyn said. And there is more. She pulled out another document, a bank statement. It showed a joint account in Dad's name and Linda's name. The account had been opened 2 years before Dad died. Regular deposits, regular withdrawals. They were having an affair, I said. Jocelyn nodded. For at least 2 years, maybe longer. I felt sick. I thought about all the times Linda had been at the house, all the times she had sat with Dad, held his hand, whispered in his ear. I thought about Grant, oblivious, trusting, proud of his wife for being so caring. Does Grant know? I asked. No, Jocelyn said. And neither does Caroline. This is our leverage, Owen. If we bring this to court, it changes everything. How? Because Linda was not just visiting your father. She was involved with him, and that calls into question her motives. If she was having an affair, then her presence in his life was not innocent. It opens the door to argue that she influenced him, not you. I sat back in the chair, trying to process it. You want to use this in court? I want to call Linda as a witness, Jocelyn said. I want to put her on the stand and ask her about the affair. I want to make her admit what she did. And when Grant hears it, the case falls apart. I thought about my brother, about the look on his face when he found out, about the humiliation, the anger, the betrayal. He is going to hate me, I said. He already does, Jocelyn said. But this is not about him. This is about the truth. Your father left you the business because you earned it. You were there. You did the work. And if we let Grant and his lawyer rewrite history, then everything your father built means nothing. I looked at the emails again, at the words my father had written to the woman my brother loved. Do it, I said. Jocelyn nodded. We go to trial next week. I will call Linda as a witness. But Owen, you need to be prepared. This is going to destroy your brother's life. I know. She closed the folder. Then let us make sure it counts. The trial began on a Monday morning in June. The courtroom was small, wood-paneled, with high windows that let in slanted beams of sunlight. Grant sat at his table with Caroline, his expression tight. Linda was in the gallery again, dressed in a pale blue dress, her hair pulled back. I sat beside Jocelyn, my hands folded on the table. I had not slept the night before. I kept thinking about what was coming, about the moment when everything would fall apart. Caroline went first. She called a doctor who testified that Dad had been on heavy medication in his final months, that his cognitive function was impaired. She called a neighbor who said I had discouraged visitors, kept Dad isolated. She made me sound like a manipulator, a schemer. Jocelyn cross-examined carefully, poking holes in the testimony, pointing out inconsistencies. But I could tell the judge was listening. This was not going to be an easy win. Then it was our turn. Jocelyn called a financial expert who walked through Dad's records, showing that the business had been profitable under my management, that I had been involved in every decision for years. She called Eugene, who testified that Dad had been clear and coherent when he drafted the will, that he had explicitly stated his reasons for leaving the business to me. Grant shifted in his seat. Caroline whispered something to him. Then Jocelyn stood. "Your Honor, we would like to call one last witness." The judge looked up. "Who?" "Linda," Jocelyn said. Grant turned sharply. Linda went pale. Caroline started to object, but the judge waved her off. "The witness will take the stand," he said. Linda stood slowly. She walked to the front of the courtroom, her heels clicking softly. She sat in the witness box, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Jocelyn approached. "Linda, how long were you married to Grant?" 8 years, Linda said. "And during that time, did you visit Owen's father often?" "Yes, he was family." "How often?" Linda hesitated. "I do not know. A few times a month." Jocelyn pulled out a document. "Phone records show you called him nearly every day for the last year of his life. Is that accurate?" Linda looked at Grant. He was staring at her, his face unreadable. "I was checking on him," Linda said. "He was sick." "And the emails?" Jocelyn said. "The ones where you wrote, 'I miss the way you make me laugh'? Were those also just checking on him?" The courtroom went silent. Grant stood up. "What is she talking about?" Caroline grabbed his arm, pulled him back down. Linda's face crumbled. "I do not know what you mean." Jocelyn handed her a printed email. "Is this your email address?" Linda looked at it. Her hands were shaking. "Yes." "And is that your father-in-law's email address?" "Yes." "Then explain this," Jocelyn said, her voice sharp. "Explain the affair. Explain the joint bank account. Explain why you were with him almost every night in his final weeks while your husband stayed at a hotel." Linda started to cry. "I loved him," she said. Grant stood again. This time, Caroline did not stop him. He stared at Linda, his face twisted in shock and rage. "You what?" Linda looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "I am sorry." He turned and walked out of the courtroom. The door slammed behind him. The judge banged his gavel. "We will take a recess." When court resumed an hour later, Grant was not there. Caroline sat alone at her table, looking shell-shocked. Linda had not returned either. The judge asked Caroline if she wanted to continue. She shook her head. "My client wishes to withdraw his contest of the will." Jocelyn stood. "Your Honor, we request that the original will be upheld and that all legal fees be paid by the plaintiff." The judge nodded. "Granted. This case is dismissed." It was over. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. Jocelyn stood beside me, her briefcase in hand. "You won," she said. I nodded, but it did not feel like victory. It felt like loss. Grant called me that night. His voice was raw, broken. "I did not know," he said. "I know. She ruined everything." I did not respond. There was nothing to say. "I am sorry," he said. "For all of it. For the lawsuit. for what I said about you and Dad. I was wrong. You were, I said, but I understand why you did it. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I am moving back to Seattle. I cannot stay here. Okay. Take care of the business, Owen. Dad would have wanted that. He hung up. I sat on the porch of Dad's house watching the sun set over the hills. The air smelled like pine and dust. Everything was quiet. Grant filed for divorce 3 days later. The proceedings were quick and brutal. Linda did not contest it. She moved out of their house in Seattle and disappeared. I heard from a mutual friend that she went to California, started over somewhere near San Diego. I did not care where she went. Grant sold his condo and moved into a smaller apartment. He quit his job in finance and took a position with a nonprofit. I did not hear from him for months. The business kept running. I hired 2 new employees, expanded our supplier contracts, opened a second location in Nampa. Dad would have been proud. One afternoon in late September, I was in the warehouse when I saw a familiar truck pull into the lot. Grant stepped out. He looked thinner, older. His hair was longer, his face tired. I walked over. What are you doing here? I wanted to see the place, he said. See what you have done with it. I showed him around. The new equipment, the updated inventory system, the plans for the second location. He nodded, asked a few questions, but mostly just listened. When we finished, we stood outside by his truck. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the pavement. I am sorry, he said again, for everything. I know. Do you think we can ever fix this? I thought about it. About the lawsuit, the betrayal, the years of distance between us, about Dad and what he would have wanted. Maybe, I said, but not today. He nodded. Fair enough. He got in his truck and drove away. I watched him go, feeling the weight of it all settle into something quieter, something I could carry. Linda lost everything. Her marriage, her reputation, her place in our family. She tried reaching out to me once, months later, through a mutual acquaintance. I never responded. Grant told me she struggled to find work, that people in Seattle knew what she had done. She drifted from job to job, city to city, never staying anywhere long. The affair had marked her in ways she could not erase. Grant rebuilt slowly. He found purpose in his nonprofit work, helping families navigate financial hardship. He stayed in Seattle but visited Boise twice a year, always calling ahead, always respectful of boundaries. We were not close, but we were not enemies either. Time had a way of smoothing the sharpest edges. As for me, I kept building. The business grew, the second location thrived, and I hired people who cared about the work the way Dad had taught me to care. I never married, never felt the need. The company was enough. The legacy was enough. Sometimes I thought about that day in court, about the look on Grant's face when the truth came out. I did not take pleasure in it, but I did not regret it either. Some betrayals cannot be undone, only survived.